Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending today's sessions. We're on the next session for the day, which is the workshop on risk management in food service. So today's certification workshop will focus on risk assessment in the food service industry. Our presenter is Mr. Hany Emam Ahmed. He is the Senior Lead Auditor and Trainer of Intertek Cristal, Middle East and Africa. Hany has more than 21 years of extensive experience in the food industry. His achievements include being a certified international food safety manager from the National Registry of Food Safety Professionals. He has also performed over 1,500 food safety audits and was involved in establishing the HACCP food safety manual for the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism. Just a note for all of you, please know that you will receive your certificates for this workshop next week. And without further ado, I hand it over to Mr. Hany.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to let me join all of you to discuss the most important part in our food industry, which is risk assessment and the implementation of the HACCP system. So before we start, just I have like quick introduction regarding Intertek. We will not take more than 2 minutes. So always Intertek trying to do everything better. Intertek has always been a pioneer, anticipating the needs of its clients with hold innovations ahead of its competitors. Intertek is distributed around the world. We have more than 46,000 employees around the world. We have more than 3,000 auditors around the world. We have done more than 90,000 audits for different standards. We are distributing in more than 100 countries. Also, we have more than 1,000 lab and offices. And our professionals are talking many language, more than 80 language of the world. Our purpose as Intertek, bringing quality, safety, and sustainability to life. Our vision to be the world's most trusted partner for quality assurance. Our values, we are global family that values diversity. We always do the right things with precision, pace, and passion. We trust each other and have fun winning together. We own and shape our future. We create sustainable growth for all. Our mission to bring quality and safety to life, as now the world in special circumstances or specific circumstances need to focus on safety and hygiene and HACCP and so on. Our ATIC services to identify and mitigate the interesting risk, evaluate how our customer products and service meet and exceed quality, safety, sustainability, and performance standards. Validating the specifications, value, and safety of our customers' raw material, products, and assets. Formally confirming that our customers' products and services meet all trusted external and internal standards. So in this slide, if we start to go to our topic, the risk assessment or risk management today. So this is a normal flow diagram or normal chart for any food supply chain in the world, starting by the source of the raw material. The raw material or raw ingredient could be from the animal origin or plant origin. So during selecting these sources of the end product, you have to make some tests for validation and verification that the raw items and raw ingredients are safe and suitable for your production to achieve the intended result by producing a food safe product. After that, you will go to the next step, which is production. This production could be in factory or kitchen or retail or whatever, based on the category of the food industry itself. After that, we have the distribution of the end product or semi-end product. Then we have delivery or receiving to restaurant or factory or your home as well, no problem. So this is the normal flow chart of the food. So I will go to the next slide. The HACCP system. Actually, there is a link between the risk management system and the HACCP. HACCP based on the hazard identification. So if I am going to start with the HACCP word, HACCP is the hazard analysis and critical control point. Yeah. Simply, the HACCP is a systematic management system to identify the hazards could affect the safety of the food and how you can control these hazards and how you can monitor these hazards to avoid any food poisoning or any customer dissatisfaction regarding your end product as a food. As most of us are aware that HACCP has been established in 1959 by NASA when they were planning to provide a safe food for the US restaurants. So from that point, they started to do like risk management system for food production or to prepare ready to eat safe food for US restaurants. So by using this system. So in the coming slides, we will see how you can use a HACCP system as a risk management system to provide or to produce a safe food for your customers.
Mr. Hany?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but your screen is not showing the slides. We can only see your, the folder. We cannot see this PowerPoint presentation.
Slide not clear?
No, it's not clear. We just can't see the slide at all. Would you like us to share it from our end because we do have your deck?
No, it's okay now.
No, we can't. We can
okay,
still see
you can share from your sides, no problem. But I have add some changes, no problem.
Okay. Kirtana, can you share it from your side?
Yeah, just give me a minute.
Yeah. Mr. Hany, which slide do you want us to share? Do you want us to just quickly
now we are slide number 10.
Oh, wow. Okay. Just hold on, please. Would you like to do a quick summary of the first 9 slides? Just
no need because it was just introduction.
Okay, great. Sorry, just hold on for 2 minutes till they sort it at their end. Just hold on, Mr. Hany.
Yeah.
They just
Okay.
Mr. Hany, can you stop sharing your screen if you don't mind?
Stop the screen sharing.
Yes.
Then stopped
Can you?
already.
Sorry.
Now, yeah, you start
Yeah.
from your side, right?
Yes. Yes. You can see it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Can you go
Okay.
to slide number 10, please?
Yeah. So as you want to change the slide, just let us know. So then Kirtana will change it for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Go to the previous slide, please. Slide number 10.
Slide 10, Kirtana.
Slide number 10. Can try again from my side?
Just give us 2 seconds. We'll let you
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
This is fine.
Yes, fine. Okay. So can we start now?
Please continue.
Yeah, okay. So now we'll continue again. Just we had some technical issues in the slides. So as we mentioned, the HACCP is a systematic technique. And the aim from the HACCP or risk management system to identify where are the potential hazards or risks in your food production. Once you identify the risks and hazards, so you will be able to control them and you will be able to monitor them to avoid any potential food hazards could lead to the food poisoning and customer dissatisfaction. And this system has been established by NASA in 1959 to provide a safe food for US astronauts. So at that point, the HACCP became very famous in the food industry field because it helps too much the organization to provide a safe food products. Either now, in some countries, the HACCP implementation became a mandatory for restaurants, food factories. Before they start the work, they have to be certified HACCP or ISO 22000 food safety management system before they start to producing any food to confirm the safety of the end products. So Next slide, please. Next. Next slide. Next one. Yeah. So why we are using the HACCP system in food industry? Of course, if you have a factory producing a food product, so what you are expecting from your interested parties? Any industry in the world having its interested parties. When I say interested parties, that means anyone or any group or people having a benefits from your organization or your food industry factory. So these interested parties having needs and expectations, and they focusing to use your safe product as a consumer. So you will look for what? Good reputation for your name as a food production factory. You will be focused on the satisfaction of your customer. Of course, if your customer is satisfied, that means the demand on your safe product will increase, which will lead to increasing in the productivity itself. Increasing in the productivity will give you a good working condition. Following a risk management system or HACCP will reduce the risk of food poisoning. Also, it will increase the staff morale for your organization because the demand on the product will increase. So you will need more staff or more manpower. So you will get a higher staff morale. Of course, you will get lower staff turnover. Also, in some countries, the national food hygiene authorities, they are rating the food service restaurants, hotels, or food factories by rating them based on their commitment with the food safety management system or HACCP system. Next slide, please. Next slide. No, not this one. Failure in the implementing food. Yeah. If you failed in the implementation of HACCP system in your factory or your food service area, of course you will get a lot of problems and bad circumstances for your organization. The complaint against your end product will increase because it's not safe. The food poisoning cases could happen. Of course, if that happens, the negative press coverage will be distributed around the country or world, whatever. Of course, the production rate will decrease because the demand on your product will decrease as well. Fine and legal costs, loss of business, cost of civil actions, high staff turnover, food loss, and closure of the factory or restaurant or hotel or whatever. So to avoid this failure in the implementing of HACCP system or any food safety management system, you have to implement that system in proper way. Once you implemented this and you identified your risks and hazards and you controlled them, so you will be easily to reach your customers by a safe end product. So next slide, please. Next slide. Food hazards and control. We have two definitions here. Please go to next slide, 15. Yeah. Food hazard and control. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. The hazard, definition of hazards is anything that has the potential to cause a harm. So this hazard could be food hazards, could be electricity, could be injury, could be anything could cause a harm to your body. The risk itself, if we are going to make a definition for the risk is the effect of uncertainty, the level of the effect of the harm on your body, which is classified to low, medium, and high. In terms of food, we have four famous hazards here: microbiological hazards, and we have three categories for this hazard. The first one, survival, not killed by any process. For example, if you are working in kitchen and the cooking temperature, improper cooking temperature below the acceptable level, so that will let the microbiology to be survived. Survival, that means the microbiological hazards are living but not multiplicate. Contamination, introduced into your food by cross-contamination or other kind of contamination from bad personal hygiene, unclean food contact surface, unclean equipment. So if your food got contaminated, could lead to the microbiological hazards. Multiplication or growing in the food of the microbiological hazard, if all factors that enhancing or help the microbiological multiplication were available in the food, so the number will increase. For example, if you have moisture, you have improper temperature, the acidity is suitable, there is a food or debris of food, the oxygen is available. So if all of these factors collected together in one area, so it will give an opportunity for the microbiological hazards to increase and multiplicate in your food. Then we have the chemical contamination, could be cleaning chemicals or pesticide by using improper concentration of the sanitizers or chemicals. Also, we have another chemicals from the organic origin like aflatoxin, mycotoxins, and toxic fish. Physical contamination, mainly from the bad personal hygiene, could be hair, glass, piece of food, piece of clothes, insects, and so on. Then the fourth one, we have the food allergens. As you know, we have 14 in the world or famous food allergens like peanuts, milk, eggs, shellfish, gluten, soy, sesame seeds, and it will lead to the immune reaction or anaphylactic shock. So this is the hazard or famous hazards in any food industry, as you know. So if you are going to implement the HACCP system or any risk management system in food services areas, so you have to control these hazards. So our objective now from implementing the risk management systems or HACCP to minimize these hazards to the acceptable level. Okay, so this is our objective now. So we will see in the next slide, by using the HACCP technique, how we will be able to control these hazards. Now, the control of microbiological hazards. You have to start from the step number 1 in your industry. You need raw items or raw material to produce your end product. And you will get these raw items or ingredients from suppliers or food suppliers. So you have in the beginning to select the proper suppliers. How you can select them? By evaluation of their condition. So you have to prepare in your organization the supplier selection procedures based on what you will approve this supplier, based on if this supplier implementing a HACCP system, following ISO 22000, following the local authorities requirement for food safety and hygiene, and you have to go to the suppliers location and to make your audit, and you evaluate them by using a checklist, and you have to do like rating for these suppliers, accepted supplier, this approved supplier, and so on. So after that, you will approve, or you will create your approved supplier list. Also, if these suppliers are approved, so you will minimize the risk of microbiological hazards because the raw items will be safer. Number two, the food safety training in your organization. You have to create a food safety culture between your team members. You have to explain to them your policy as organization between you and any food safety management system standard. For example, the HACCP policy. This is the agreement between you and the standard. So all staff should be aware about this policy and this agreement between you and the HACCP system or food safety management system. Then the well-designed infrastructure. If the flow of the food processing in a proper way, so it will minimize the microbiological hazards. So from step number one, you have to design your food area or food production area to be in one flow. For example, if you are starting from the employee or the team member will start their shift from the staff entrance after the follow the procedures and instructions of personal hygiene and so on, and they got in the production area. So if you are going to follow the one-way direction flow, so this employee will not be able to return back to the previous point. For example, if someone working in the cooking area, okay, which is usually a critical control point, and he wanted to return back to the defrosting area and then come back again to cooking area, this will not be allowed or not allowed to him to do that. Why? To maintain the one-way food direction or one-way of the food production, to avoid any cross-contamination or microbiological hazards. Correct cleaning and disinfection. You have to use the proper chemicals and sanitizers will be used in your food production areas. Not all chemical will give you a good results in terms of disinfection and sanitization. So you have to use the correct chemical, and you have to follow the material safety data sheet, and you have to follow the supplier instructions of that chemicals. Also, you have to provide enough storage places to avoid any contact between the raw and ready-to-eat food, to avoid the cross-contamination. High level of personal hygiene. You have to provide your facilities by the equipment of personal hygiene, hand washing sinks, hairnet, mask, gloves, training, posters, and so on, to get a high level of personal hygiene, which will lead to minimize the microbiological hazards. Good pest control. You have to follow the pest control precautions and the instruction to avoid any infestation that could transfer like salmonella or another kind of microorganism into your food or end product. Good waste management as well will minimize the microbiological hazard. So these points will help you to control the microbiological hazard in your food production areas. So we'll go to next slide. For chemicals as a hazard, only approved chemicals should be used from nominated suppliers. And you have to follow the dilution and contact time specified by the supplier. Not just to dilute the chemical and just spread them on the contact surfaces or tables or floor or whatever. Just you have to give a chance to that chemicals by giving the contact time as per the pamphlet of these chemicals. So once you follow that, your chemical will be effective. You have to follow the instruction during dilution. Also, you have to follow the material safety data sheet of cleaning and disinfection in your organization. Next slide, please. Physical hazards, it's famous as well in the food industry areas. You have to follow or you have to use the approved supplier. You have to follow good maintenance and infrastructure of food handling areas. Good personal hygiene and training. You have to inspect the area against any physical hazard. For example, if your factory or your kitchen not maintained well, so the physical hazard level will increase. Why? Because the physical issues around the food production. For example, spare parts, bolts, piece of wood, piece of metal, piece of glass. So you have to maintain a good condition for your factory or your kitchen to minimize the physical hazards. As well as all raw items or ready-to-eat food should be covered to avoid any physical hazard as hair or nail or piece of nail or piece of clothes or whatever. Inspection to make sure all areas are free from any physical hazards. Good pest control, good cleaning. In factories, the metal detection step in the packaging area or packaging step, you have to follow or you have to implement the metal detecting procedures to avoid any physical hazards. Next slide, please. Yeah. Food allergy, as you know now from the news, every day we are hearing about new incident or accident related to food allergy. And now some countries, they start to put an obligatory instructions on the food producers to put a label on the product, and they have to mention if any allergy ingredient included in that product to avoid the immune reaction of these allergens or to avoid the anaphylactic shock could happen to any customer. So you have to select the suppliers that will provide you by an allergic food. For example, the hotels, in the hotel should follow a specific procedures of allergy control to avoid any problems could happen to their guests. Labeling and signages. Labeling, that means the end product should carry a label, shows us the ingredient of that product if contain an allergy ingredient or no. Signages, for example, in restaurant, you have to put like a signage at the entrance of the restaurant. Please, if you have any kind of allergy, tell us so we can help you. Or you can add or put a signages around the buffet as alarm to your guest or your customer. In the hotel, at the reception desk, you can add in the registration card, please, if you have any kind of allergy, please tell us. So the front desk people or team, they will contact directly with the executive chef, and the executive chef, he will communicate with that guest regarding his food during his stay in the hotel to avoid any anaphylactic shock or immune reaction. Color coding in the menus, for example, if any dish or any kind of meal contain an allergic ingredient, so should be colored by different color. Specific equipment during the preparation of any food for the allergic people, you have to use completely separate equipment, like separate knife, separate chopping board, separate table, and the team member who are working on this food, he should change gloves and use another gloves and so on. Why? To avoid any cross-contamination between the allergic food and the food will be prepared for the allergic person. Customer awareness. As we mentioned earlier, at the entrance of any restaurant or hotel, you can add like label or signage or notification. Please, if you have any kind of allergy, please tell us. Training for the team members, of course, to be aware about the importance of allergy control in the food industry or food serving areas. Please, next slide. Yeah, based on the previous hazards, the food has been classified into 4 types of food. High-risk food, mainly the ready-to-eat food. Also could be like milk, cream, cheese, yogurt, and products containing them. So this product, if you look at them, this product include the 6 factors that enhancing or improve the microbiological growth. So, for example, cheese. Cheese contains high level of protein, high level of moisture. The acidity is suitable for the bacterial growth. Moisture is high. If the time available, temperature not proper, so the bacteria can grow. The problem here is that the cheese is ready to eat food, so it will be directly to the mouth or the stomach of the guest. So if that cheese is containing a high level of microorganism or food poisoning bacteria, so that guest will have a problem. Also, we have another kind of food like eggs, meat, or meat product, poultry, fish, and seafood. Raw food. Raw foods, the major source of food poisoning organisms, such as raw meat, raw chicken, raw milk, raw vegetable, and fruits. Low risk food, the dry foods, and the foods with high level of sugar or salt. For example, dry products, jam, biscuits, dry food, cereals, dried pasta, dried rice, flour, crisps, canned food, and so on. Ready to eat raw food. So we have ready to eat cooked food, and we have ready to eat raw food, as fruit and salad, vegetables should be thoroughly washed and sanitized before consumption. So next slide, please. Yeah, next. So now we will talk about the implementation of HACCP system itself. So please, next slide. Yeah. To make it easy and simple, you have to know the HACCP system is based on 3 main pillars. You can note establish or implement HACCP system if you are not implementing these three pillars. So the first pillar is prerequisite programs, PRPs. Then we have the preliminary steps of HACCP. Then we have the main principles of HACCP. So yeah, the definition of prerequisite programs. Next slide. The prerequisite program, the minimum hygienic standard that you have to implement in your food factory or your production area to minimize the risk. Without prerequisite programs or without PRPs, you will not be able to implement the HACCP system or even ISO 22000 or another safety, food safety management system, because this is the base. So number one, the pillar number one to implementing HACCP is to implement the prerequisite programs, basic conditions and activities that are necessary within the organization and throughout the food chain to maintain food safety HACCP system. For example, of them, of course, the location of food establishment. If you are going to start your food business or whatever, you have to choose the correct location. The location of food premises or establishments or factories or restaurant or whatever should be very near from the services, not away, not in the desert. So the location of the food premises itself or food factory, very important to implement the prerequisite programs or to implement the HACCP. Number two, the layout and design of the food premises. As we mentioned earlier, if you are going to follow the correct food safety management system or HACCP system, so you have to follow the one-way direction technique. So from the beginning, you have to design your factory based on your end product. Step number one, receiving, then storage, then preparation, then cooking or production, then holding or packaging, then dispatching or service, whatever. So you have to follow or you have to implement a very good layout and design for the food factory or food industry areas. The condition of the food premises, the maintenance. You have to keep the food factory and kitchen in good maintenance or good engineering situation. You have to follow food allergy control, personal hygiene, pest control, food suppliers control, cleaning and sanitization, packaging, calibration, waste management, glass breakage management. All of these points related to the PRPs. So no HACCP without these points, because in some cases, some factories or organizations, they asking for ISO 22000 certification or HACCP certification. Okay, but once we went there and to make the primary evaluation of the factory or the restaurant, we found that the PRP is not there. So the step number one, he has to start to implement the procedures of PRPs. And as a management responsibility, as we will see in the coming slides, they have to follow a specific points or regulation that demonstrate them they are commitment or commit with the food safety management system or HACCP, because the implementation of PRPs will need like financial resources, like manpower, and so on. We will see in the coming slides. Next slide. Next slide.
Mr. Hany?
Yeah.
Just giving you a time check. We have 20 minutes left.
15?
20.
20, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So now the step number 2 in the pillar of HACCP, or pillar number 2, the preliminary step of HACCP. Put in your mind that now you are inside a new factory that will implement HACCP, and you are working there as a food safety manager or HACCP manager, or yeah. So first, the step number 1, you have to create your team. You will not work away alone in the HACCP management system or food safety management system. So you have to create your team. And the risk management system or the HACCP system will be implemented on each single step in your production process, starting from selection of the supplier until the consumer. So every single step of this, you have to choose someone has the experience in that area. For example, HACCP team, of course, yeah, I have to choose someone from purchasing because he has the experience how to select the supplier. The HACCP team should include one from engineering, one from production, executive chef or production manager or whatever, one from training, and so on, one from the top management. Yeah, so number 1, assembling of the HACCP team. Number 2, that team should sit together and to start to make brainstorming and describe their end product. If the end product pasteurized milk, okay, then they have to describe their end product. Pasteurized milk at 70 to 75 temperature for 15, not more than 25 seconds, and so on. And this product for children and for adults, or for all ages, and so on. So you have to describe the product. After that, the intended use of that product. Who will use it? What is the objective from producing this product? Then you have to, with your team, you have to create your flow diagram, your map, the steps. Why? Because this flow diagram will be used in the hazard analysis. So very important to create a correct and accurate flow diagram related to your factory. After that, you have to make like confirmation of that flow diagram by comparing what you have created on paper with the reality on the floor. Is it the same, or there is a difference, or need some evaluation, need some changes, some addition, whatever? So this is the pillar number 2 of HACCP, assembling of HACCP team. Describe the end product, intended use of the product, flow diagram, on-site confirmation of the flow diagram. After that, we will go to the main 7 principles of HACCP. The next slide. Yeah, now we have the confirmed flow diagram. So on that flow diagram, you will start to make your first step of the main principle of the HACCP, which is the hazard analysis. So for example, if you have in the first step in your flow diagram, for example, the receiving step, you have to identify the hazards at that point, or that step. Could be physical or biological or chemical or allergenic, and so on. In the new standard of ISO 22000-2018, in clause number 8, if you want there, so you will see the add another point extra after hazard analysis, hazard assessment. Hazard assessment, after you finish the hazard analysis, you have to categorize your hazard. Is it high or medium or low? And you have to add your control measures and mitigation plan as a risk management system. So here is the point. In the new standard of ISO 22018, in the clause starting from clause 8.2, you will see that explanation. The first point will be hazard analysis, just to identify the hazard. Microbiological, physical, chemical, and so on. But hazard assessment, you will go in details after you identify the hazard itself. For example, if we identified that there is a physical hazard as a receiving area, so you have to assess the physical hazard at the receiving area. Is it high or low or medium? And what is the risk specifically at that area? Wood, glass, hair, nail, whatever. So, and then you have to calculate your risk factor by using the risk matrix, probability and severity. Then you have to calculate your risk factor as a hazard, physical hazard at the receiving area. Then you have to put your control measures. Then you have to put monitoring measures. Then you have to put the corrective action in case of deviation, and so on. So here in this step, we have in the hazard analysis an addition, more point related to ISO 22000, which is hazard assessment. Okay. Identification of the critical control points. Okay. Critical control points, you can identify it by using the decision tree, we will see. Establishment the critical limit of each CCP. Establishment a monitoring system for each CCP. Establishment the corrective action, verification and validation of HACCP system. Then documentation. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. Here, the responsibilities of management and HACCP team. Without management commitment, there is no HACCP. Without management commitment, there is no risk management system. So this is the most important part in our presentation today, the responsibility of management. Yeah, from where this responsibility will come? From the agreement between the top management and the HACCP standard or food safety management system standard. By what? By the HACCP policy or food safety policy. This is the agreement between both sides, the management of the organization and HACCP standard or food safety management standard. So the organization shall demonstrate their commitment with respect to HACCP or food safety management system by what? By creating a policy statement that they are committed with the food safety management system. They have to establish objectives. We will not implement a risk management system for nothing. We have to have an objectives. And these objectives should be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, with time frame to evaluate your system at the end. You have to make sure once you implemented the HACCP system will not affect your normal operation or process. So you have to make integration between the HACCP and food safety management system or risk management system and your other processes of the business. Should be in one unit, in one cycle, working together. After that, the management should be committed with the resources. Of course, HACCP system or risk management system need resources, financial resource, manpower, equipment, tools, devices, and so on. So management should provide the suitable and enough resources to implement the HACCP or risk management system. After that, the team member itself should believe in the importance of the HACCP system and risk management system. By what? By training, workshop, recognition, and so on, gathering, whatever. So you have to create that culture between your team member as a top management to show your commitment with the HACCP system or risk management system. Then, directing and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the HACCP, you have to identify the responsibilities and authorities of your food safety team, okay, and should be distributed around the organization. The appointment of food safety team or HACCP team, their job descriptions, their roles, their responsibilities, and so on. And they have to be directly contact with the top management, reporting to the top management. Then they have to show that they are committed with the continual improvement of HACCP, providing resources, BRBs, training, equipment, tools, supporting the other relevant management roles. What does it mean? Some other departments in your organization should be supported to be integrated within the HACCP system or food safety management system or risk management system, such as what? Finance department. It's very important to implement such a system. So you have to integrate them or to support them to be inside the cycle of the HACCP system. Engineering department, they are very important to implement HACCP system or risk management system. So you have to involve them in the HACCP system implementation and so on. So these points are very important that the management should follow to show their commitment and leadership with respect to HACCP system or any risk management system in the organization. Next slide, please.
Mr. Hany?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. We have just 5 minutes left. Would you be able to conclude?
I will try to run hard.
Okay. Yeah, because, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, HACCP flow diagram, I will not go in detail. I think all of you are professional in food safety, so you know what does it mean by a flow diagram. This is a schematic and systematic technique describing the process of the production of the end product, validation of flow diagram by confirmation outside the organization itself or the production area. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a simple example for the flow diagram. Okay, purchasing, receiving, then preparation, mixing, cooking, cooling, packaging, distribution. And based on the industry, you can change. So here, cooking, you can put production, cooling, you can put like packaging and so on. So based on the industry itself, you will create your flow diagram. There is no a specific or standard flow diagram. You will create your flow diagram based on your industry or based on your, to be more accurate, based on your end product. Okay, next slide. Next. Yeah. Hazard analysis, I think I have explained this point by using the flow diagram step by step. You have to start to make your hazard analysis. For example, you have to create a table. Okay, then you have to write, for example, on the left side step, okay, receiving a potential hazard, physical, chemical, and biological. Then the third column will be the control measures. The fourth column will be monitoring technique. The fifth column will be corrective action in case of deviation. Sixth column will be the responsibility, and so on. This is called hazard analysis, but not required from your side to evaluate the hazard level, the assessment. The assessment, another story, and related to the ISO 22000-2018, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, next slide. Yeah, CCBs. As you know, we have BRBs, we have CCBs, we have OBRBs, and you have to differentiate between them, but we are talking here specifically on HACCP. So critical control point, easily, that point should put a control and monitoring on them. And all CCBs or critical control points should have a critical limit. to maintain the critical limit in the acceptable level. Okay, so CCB should have what? Should have the control measures, should have monitoring measures, should have a critical limit. Otherwise, it will not be critical control point. Okay, so how we can identify CCB? Based on what? Based on knowledge of the team members. We cannot bring someone from outside our industry and asking him about the CCBs. How you can identify our CCBs? No, the knowledge of the team members is very important. If you are going to identify CCBs in the catering, so you'll need some chefs and food safety team working in the field of catering to identify the CCBs. If you are working in the meat industry, so you will need professional people working in the meat processing to identify your CCB, and so on. Scientific information should be with a specific level of graduation. Trade information, the circumstances around that product. Decision tree, based on risk, severity, and existence of control measures, and the codex of the CCBs. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Yeah, here just simplified decision tree. As you know, the decision tree including 4 questions, but here just we made it more easy or more simple. How? You have to ask yourself at the step on the flow diagram. For example, the receiving, if you are going to ask yourself, if the control deviated at the receiving area, is it likely that food poisoning will occur? If the answer no, so it is not a CCB, it will be control point, or you need good hygienic practices to be more focused on that area. So if the answer is, yeah, you have to ask yourself another question. Is there any subsequent step or procedure will eliminate the hazard or no? If the answer no, it is a CCB. If the answer yes, it is a control point. Yeah, for example, cooking, the most famous point, CCB point, cooking. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, if you are going to cook high-risk food such as cooked rice. Okay, simply, if any deviation happened during the cooking of rice, for example, temperature or bad personal hygiene or physical hazard or chemical hazard, whatever, is there any process or step will eliminate the hazard before the rice reach the mouth of our guest? If yes, so this is not a CCB. If no, if the guest have eaten that contaminated rice, he will get sick, so this is a CCB. So easily, if another step will cover the hazard, that means not a CCB, it's control point. If we are talking about ISO, it will be OBRB. So, but if there is no other step or subsequent step will cover or eliminate the hazard, that means this is a CCB. Okay, go to the next slide. Critical limit, the differentiation between the acceptable level and non-acceptable level. So for example, the cooking temperature, whatever, 75 to 78. So you have to maintain this acceptable level. Pasteurization, for example, 70 to 75. So you have to, for 15 to 25 seconds. So you have to keep or maintain the temperature and time both in the acceptable level to avoid any deviation. So now we will start to talk about the critical limits in the main principles of HACCP system or HACCP plan. So the critical limit definition is the measurable value which separates the acceptable level from the unacceptable level. So the critical limits at CCBs shall be measurable. Conformance with the critical limits shall ensure that the acceptable level is not exceeded. So the aim from identification of the critical limit will give you the opportunity to know how to control the CCBs and how you can stop the exceeding from the acceptable level. For example, here the cooking temperature between 75 to 78. So once you know now the critical limit from 75 to 78, you can put your control measures and you can put your monitoring measures. So you can control the acceptable level or the critical limit. So now we will go to the another main principles of HACCP, which is the identification of the critical limit. So the importance to identify the critical limits will help you to put your control measures and monitoring measures on the CCP or the critical control point. So from that point, we can understand that the critical limit should be measurable, should be with time frame, should be, you can read it, you can calculate something, you can collect data. For example, here we have the cooking temperature between 75 Celsius to 78 Celsius. So you can control it. If you are going to cook a kind of food or type of food, so you can control the temperature between 75 to 72, 78 by controlling the temperature, by controlling the heating, by taking reading by probe thermometer. So you can control, and from that control, you can put your monitoring measures as well. So from control and monitoring, you can put your corrective action plan in case of the deviation from the critical limit. So the critical limit will help you to know the acceptance level of the control and will help you to differentiate between the acceptable and non-acceptable point. Yeah, for examples here for critical limits, as you can see at the left side, critical control point, CCP, here cooking temperature of the internal temperature should be, for example, here in Fahrenheit for 145 Fahrenheit for minimum 3 minutes. So this is the critical limit. So you have to control, to put your monitoring procedures here. By what? By checking temperature. You have to check the temperature time to time to make sure that the temperature is 145 Fahrenheit. In case if any problem happens, such as the temperature went down, so you have to make or to continue to cook or to heat the food to maintain the acceptable level of the critical limit. Okay, at the holding point, for example, on the buffet side or food service side, so the hot holding temperature also 135 Fahrenheit, which is maybe like 65 to 70. So maximum for 4 hours. This is a critical limit. So you cannot keep the food or hot food on the buffet station more than 4 hours. So this is a critical limit. So how you can monitor this? By also checking temperature time to time. For example, every 1 hour, you can take the reading of the temperature of that hot food. If you find the temperature going down below 65, so you can take your corrective action by discarding the food. For the cold item on the buffet as well, should be between 4 to 5 Celsius for 4 hours. If you found any deviation by checking temperature time to time, for example, every 1 hour, so if you found temperature going up more than 6, for example, so you have to take your corrective action by discarding that food. The reheating of the ready-to-eat food, also it's only once at 82 Celsius for 15 seconds. So this is the critical limit. You can make measurement, temperature and time relationship. So based in that, you can control the CCP. Once you found any deviation, you can take your corrective action, as you can see in this example in the table. Yeah, but how you can establish a monitoring system for each CCP? As I mentioned earlier, from the flow diagram, you will identify the points, the critical control points that the hazard could happen from that point. Okay, so any single CCP in your flow diagram, you have to put your monitoring measurements. Okay, so at each CCP, a monitoring system shall be established for each control measure or combination of control measures to detect any failure to remain within critical limits. The system shall include all scheduled measurements relative to the critical limit. So you have to choose the way how you will monitor the control measures. If the control measures, for example, in the cooking step, to read the temperature time to time every 1 hour, whatever, so the monitoring here should be the inspection, the visual inspection on the chefs or on the producers by visual, by yourself or by camera, whatever. So you have to monitor the control measures is working. Yeah, so the monitoring system at each CCP and for each OPRPs, Operation Prerequisite Program, in case of ISO, shall consist of documented information. So every single point you are doing in the monitoring should be documented, should be recorded as an evidence. So measurements of observation that provide results within an adequate time frame, as we mentioned, for example, pasteurization, temperature 70 to 75 within limit time from 15 to 25 seconds. So you have to monitor that and to have to control and maintain this temperature and that time. Monitoring methods or devices. In case of pasteurization, how you can monitor the pasteurization step by using some machines, the automatic taking data and collecting data of the temperature and time. Also, you can use cameras, you can use manual recording, and so on. Monitoring frequency. How many times you will go to the pasteurization line to check the temperature and time? Every hour, every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes, every whatever. So you have to put your frequency of the monitoring. Monitoring results, that's what I just mentioned, to record every single point related to the monitoring, to keep it as a documented information to be used as an evidence. Responsibility and authority related to the monitoring. You have to assign someone to be responsible about the monitoring and control measures to follow up. Responsibility and authority related to the evaluation of monitoring results should be done by the food safety team or HACCP team. After collecting the data of monitoring, they will evaluate the control on the pasteurization step or on the CCP. This is the aim of monitoring, or the target or objectives from the monitoring itself, to make sure that the control measures are working properly in specific time frequently and recorded and kept as a documented information for an evidence. Yeah, here just we have simple examples about or for the monitoring. We have organoleptic. You can look, smell, and taste, and this usually used in the receiving area. So if you are going to receive like raw meat, you have to check that physical characteristics like the look, the color, the texture of the meat, the smell of the meat. Okay, if something ready to eat, you can take, you can taste it, you can take temperature, and so on. Also, from the monitoring steps or techniques, the visual inspection of the premises itself. If you are going to monitor and control the physical hazards, for example, so you have to take several like inspection daily to make a tour or something like this, to check every single point related to maintenance, cleaning, pest control, to make sure that the suppliers at the receiving area are following the regulation, and so on. Checking controls, the data you collected from the monitoring and control, you have to check if there any problem, any deviation, any mistake in the recording, and so on. observation and supervision by yourself or by camera or whatever. So the organization shall specify the corrections and corrective action to be taken when critical limits are not met. So if the result from the monitoring shows us that there is a deviation from the critical limit, so at that point, you have to introduce your corrective actions immediately to bring back the step to the acceptable level. So for example, if the cooking temperature not proper, less than 65, so your corrective will be to increase the heating to reach to 65 to 70, to bring back the step to the correct way. This is the role of the corrective action. Yeah. So once the critical limit has been deviated, so you have to introduce your corrective action to stop that deviation. So corrective action, the action to be taken when a critical limit is breached. So remedial action should be taken before a critical limit is breached. What does it mean? To avoid that deviation, so the control measures should be active. You have to stop, or you have to prevent the critical limit to be deviated. So if the non-conformity occur or the CCP lost the control on the CCP, so the organization shall take action to control and correct it. Deal with the consequences. What does it mean? If the food will not be healthy or not safe for the customer after the breaking down the critical limit, so you can take action by discard that food. Okay, and you have to deal with that consequences to maintain your guests or your customer satisfaction in terms of food safety. If the product, for example, produced in factory and you discovered that there is a unsafe product went to the market, so at that point you have to introduce your corrective action by recall that product from the market to your organization again to take the action, and so on. So you have to evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause. You have to make evaluation about the that deviation. At which level that deviation happen? Is just a low deviation, or medium deviation, or high risky deviation? So based on the category of the deviation itself, you will put your corrective action plan, because in some cases, corrective action plan will need some resources or financial resources or new equipment or tools. So you have to make a good evaluation for the corrective action will be needed. After that, you have to review the effectiveness of any corrective action will be taken. In some cases, you have to make some changes to your HACCP for your HACCP plan, if not applicable in some steps or some cases. So you have to review it, and you have to repeat the hazard analysis and the hazard assessment. Corrective action shall be appropriate to the effects of the non-conformities encountered. The corrective action should be specific for that non-conformity or for the deviation from the CCP critical limit. Here, just example for the corrective action plan. So the first point in the corrective action plan, you have to know the root of the cause, why this is happening. Why the pasteurization temperature and time has been deviated. Why the cooking temperature has been deviated, and so on. So you have to know the root. Is there a problem in the machine? Is the problem that the team members working on that machine not well trained? Is there any shortage in the maintenance, and so on? So you have to know the root of the cause of the deviation. After that, you have to put your corrective action. Propose your corrective action steps. Then who will be responsible to implement the corrective action should be assigned. Okay. If the corrective action needs some decision to stop production or stop cooking or stop service, you have to take it. For example, in some cases, if you have a packaging machine, for example, that packaging machine suddenly there is a parts has been broken during the packaging itself. So it could lead to physical hazard. So you have to stop the packaging step immediately to make your corrective action before you continue the packaging. So you have to take a serious decision in such cases, to stop the production or stop sales or to recall the product from the market, whatever. Then once you stop the production or recall back the product, so you can make quarantine, testing, reprocessing, disposal, whatever. Time frame of the corrective action should be identified. The corrective action not open. The time of corrective action plan implementation not open. So you have to put a time frame for the implementation of the corrective action by days, by months, whatever. After you finish the implementation of the corrective action, you have to evaluate the effectiveness of the corrective action has been done. By what? By the evaluation of the control and monitoring of the CCP deviated. Okay, is it return back to the normal, or still there is some problem in the control and monitoring? Here, the step number 6 in the main principles of HACCP, the validation and verification. After you identified the hazard, you identified the critical control point, you identified the critical limit, you have done the monitoring and the measurements, you have done the corrective action. So now you have to validate and verify that or these steps has been done, implemented correctly, or there is some problem. So the validation obtaining, so you have to collect an evidences to confirm you that the HACCP plan is working properly and the CCPs and critical limits are under control. Very good. After that, you have to make verification. Verification could be by the inspection, by the laboratory analysis or laboratory test to collect samples from food, samples from the machine, sample from the food contact surfaces, and do lab analysis or lab test against the microorganism. If the microorganism within the acceptable limit, that means your HACCP plan is working properly. If you find by lab analysis or by lab test the microorganism level is high and exceeding the acceptable level of contamination, that means your HACCP plan with a problem. So you have to review your HACCP plan again and to make sure it's working properly. So this is the meaning of validation and verification. Okay, after that, you have to make documentation. So verification and validation techniques, you can review the HACCP plan, as we mentioned, review the CCP, review and determine the adequacy of corrective action, reviewing critical limits, reviewing other records related to the HACCP plan, direct observation or measurement at a CCP sample collection and analysis to determine if the product meets all safety standards, on-site observation and record review, audits and inspections. So you can validate and verify your HACCP plan through these techniques. When you have to review your HACCP plan, if you discover that your CCP is always not under control and the monitoring technique or monitoring techniques have been failed, so at that point, and the same non-conformity repeating, so at that point you have to review your HACCP plan. You have to review your hazard analysis, you have to review your CCP, you have to review your corrective action. So maybe there is a mistake or a deficiency in your HACCP plan. So you have to review it if your corrective action not working. When the organization determines the need of changes or for changes to the HACCP, including personal changes, the change shall be carried out and communicated in planned manner. You have to put plan. You have to study that changes will affect your HACCP system or food safety management system or no. You have to put your resources or provide your resources will be needed. You have to change the responsibilities and authorities if needed, and so on. After that, you have to make your changes on the HACCP plan itself. Documentation. All what we have or what have been mentioned during this presentation about the HACCP and risk management should be documented. So PRPs, pest control, supplier control, personal hygiene, temperature reading, receiving record should be documented, because all of these documentation will be the evidence that will show us the HACCP system is effective. So when creating and updating HACCP document, the organization shall ensure appropriate identification and description of the document itself. So the document should have a title like issuing date, code or the name of the document, code of the document, the approval by whom, the issuing date, version number, and so on. And this should be controlled, not anyone allowed to change anything in the documentation system. Okay, format of the documentation could be software version, could be paper, could be electronic, whatever. Also should contain the review and approval from whom or from which person. Why is documentation is required? To validate the effectiveness of the HACCP system, to be in case of complaint or illness investigation, so you will use this documentation system. Due diligence to be used during the inspections from authority, legal compliance in case of any court cases regarding food poisoning or whatever. So you will use this documentation as an evidence that you are implementing a good HACCP system or food safety management system in the place. Evidence for external auditors' questions. If you have been inspected by municipality auditors, so they will ask you about the control measures, monitoring measures. So you have to show them evidence, and that evidence is the document. It will show them that everything is under control and the HACCP plan is working properly. Yeah, this slide just shows some examples for the records of HACCP. So like approved supplier list should be available in the place, critical control points, monitoring records, internal audit schedule for HACCP, internal audit non-conformity and corrective action report, list of internal audits, summary report of internal audit, circular agenda of the HACCP meeting, report of HACCP meeting, customer complaint record, calibration certificates, prerequisite program. Prerequisite program, as you know, all the prerequisite program, pest control, cleaning and sanitization, personal hygiene, calibration, waste management, water management, and so on. So all of these documents should be available in your organization as an evidence for the HACCP system in the place. Yeah, now how to start HACCP system in your food production area? As we mentioned earlier, but you have to choose a team, you have to select the HACCP team, then you have to train that team on the HACCP system and food safety management system, and you have to create a food safety and HACCP culture between your staff in your organization. They have to believe in the effectiveness of food safety management system and the HACCP system. You have to make teamwork between them, establish the procedure of HACCP plan, the main three pillars of the HACCP: prerequisite program, preliminary steps, and the 7 principles of the HACCP. You have to establish the monitoring system. You have to establish the corrective action and improvement plan. Verification and validation should be implemented. The documentation system should be well maintained and should be very strong. Yeah, now we reached the end of this presentation. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your attention. So if any question, I am ready for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hany. There was one question
thank you very much.
that we did get from the audience. It was about how to become an effective and efficient HACCP trainer, what are the necessary things to consider?
Yeah. So, well, if someone wants to be professional as a HACCP team leader or HACCP auditor or food safety management system auditor, so first of all, he has to take the essential training for that. For example, if he will start from the first step, so you have to take training, for example, based on his graduation level. If, for example, if he graduated from science background or medical background or agriculture background, so he can start with the level 4 food safety management system. Then after that, he can attend training for ISO 22000 lead auditor course, 5 days. Then also he has to attend HACCP course level 4 for 5 days. Also, he has to attend like auditing technique or auditing skills courses. It will be helpful for him. Also, he has to be aware about the risk management system techniques, how to identify the risk and how he can calculate the risk factor and so on. This is the base. On top of that, he has to have like food microbiology, postgraduate diploma, food technology, master's degree or bachelor degree, whatever. So this is a step. So once he collected all the information, so now he has to join an auditor to see on reality how the audit will be performed or the HACCP will be performed or how the HACCP will be implemented if he wants to be an auditor. So he has to perform a specific numbers of days to be an auditor. For example, he will be at the beginning like only observer for 10 man days or 10 audits, then for 10, then he will be auditor. To be lead auditor, he has to attend like more than 20 man days audits and so on until he be lead auditor and so on. For if he wanted to work as an auditor or inspector in the field of food safety and hygiene. So, but there is another sector. If he wanted to work in the manufacture sector or food manufacturing, so he has to join someone or food safety manager in a food factory or meat processing factory, for example, or dairy production factory, for example, and he has to join training at least for 3 months after he complete his training plan. As we mentioned in the beginning, the training plan should be based on food microbiology or agriculture science or veterinary or hygiene background, whatever. Then he has to build up on it the food safety training level 4, HACCP training level 4, ISO 22000, 2018, risk management system, auditing skills courses. Also, he can add 9001 as a quality management system. After that, he can join someone with good experience in the food manufacture field for 3 months for on-job training. How that guy or how that person implementing the food safety management system and the HACCP. This is for the manufacture sector. If he wants to join the catering field, so he has also to join such a big hotels with a food safety manager there or hygiene manager there for 3 months on job training after he complete his training plan as we mentioned. After that, he can start and he can develop himself by attending conferences, by workshops, self-training, and so on. Then he will be okay, inshallah, to work as auditor or food safety manager or HACCP manager or hygiene manager as he wants. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hany, for all the information that you've given us today. That was the only question we had. If there are any other questions from the audience later on when they view this, I will definitely get it communicated to you.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank you
so
very
very
much.
much for your time and energy.
Thank you. Thank you very much having me. Thank you very much.